watching closely.
What's the secret, Max?
You just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me.
Hello, and welcome to The Establishing Shot, a podcast where we do deep dives into directors and their filmographies. I am your host, Eli Price, and we are here on episode 119 of the podcast. As you may know, we kind of wrapped up our Spielberg series with a Spielberg epilogue last week. And so we're kind of in a little bit of a hiatus. I still have some episodes that I'm wanting to do, kind of spread throughout the end of this year to the end of this year. So this is kind of a special episode. I didn't anticipate this happening, but I got in contact, reached out to by indie film a director and his agent to check out this new indie film, Stationed at Home. And so today I'm going to do a quick review of this film. And I had the opportunity and privilege of interviewing the director, Daniel Masciari, about this movie and about, his experience as a director and a filmmaker. And so, I'm excited to get to do this and really enjoyed this film. So I'm going to I'll do is I'll just kind of introduce it, give a quick review, my thoughts on the movie, and then we'll transition into that interview with Daniel, and it was a great interview, a great conversation. He had some awesome things to say about the movie that I really loved. That really kind of I guess confirmed a lot of things I was feeling or thinking with the movie. So I'm excited to share with you that conversation with Daniel. But let's talk about the movie. Daniel Masciari, he's an indie filmmaker from Boston or the Boston area, and this is his first feature film, his debut feature called Stationed at Home. It is shot in black and white and set in the late 90s on a cold Christmas Eve in Binghamton, New York. And it follows this taxi driver named Ralph, played by Eric Bjarnar, who was kind of a revelation in this movie. He's not a well-known guy, obviously, but was really great acting in this. So enjoyed that. But it follows him, Ralph, this taxi driver, on his night shift rounds on this cold Christmas Eve, as he has recurring encounters with this ragtag crew and is anticipating the International Space Station going across the sky into view. And so, first of all, the film looks phenomenal. He worked with, his DP was Jackson Jarvis, and in the interview he talks about his collaboration with him, and it looks really great. I was getting Jim Jarmusch vibes from the movie, not just because of movies like, the Jim Jarmusch film Night on Earth, which is, also kind of taxi driver themed, but not just because of that, but it really obviously the indie feel that you get with a Jarmusch film you get here, but also just the visual sensibility, the kind of there's this kind of dry humor throughout, and you're really following these kind of outsider characters that I think you get a lot with Jim Jarmusch. So which I love Jim Jarmusch. He's kind of one of my favorite indie film directors, and so I was kind of locked into that feel from the get-go because of that. And one of the things that impressed me most with this movie, and I talk with Daniel about this later on, is the visual language. He has a real sensibility for how to communicate with the camera, not just with the dialogue of the characters or narration or whatever, but communicating with you what he's trying to get across with the visual language. One of the things that we talk about in the interview is the insert shots. There's tons of insert shots of a doll or a nesting doll on a shelf, or there's when you're in Ralph's home, kind of these objects and things that he is placing or grabbing, um, his cat, wherever his cat is positioned. Um, these insert shots that really like give you a feel for the space you're in, the atmosphere, um, making you kind of like pause and meditate on that. Um, and then just like uh I don't know, like, I talk about this transition that he uses to kind of like it's a humorous transition that is totally like visual. There's not anything being said, but it communicates so much of like, Ralph is scratching off a lottery ticket, and then it cuts to them with this big meal at a diner, and you're communicating like this taxi driver and his passenger are now have decided to share a meal together. You've cut in the edit from him scratching off the ticket just before you kind of see that he's won to that meal. There's so much communicated in that, right? Ralph has decided to share this with Harry, the other character. It's humorous because they've decided to go have a big meal at a diner with this lottery money that he's won. It's not a lot. It's like a few hundred probably. That's a scratch off. Yeah, just like this communication through visual language, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of looking up at the sky, and that theme of remember to look up, kind of throughout visually. So I was really impressed with just ability to use visual language in such powerful and refined way for a debut film. The other thing I was surprised by was the humor. It kind of had me chuckling throughout the movie. It's not like laugh out loud humor. It's kind of like chuckle worthy humor that I really appreciated. Just some of it is situational. There's this scene where before Ralph and Harry meet where Harry's kind of talking to his girlfriend and trying to have a serious conversation with her. And Ralph is in the background getting coffee, and it's loud and pouring into his cup, and Harry pauses and looks back at him. Kind of situational humor. Some of it's even like slapstick or silly. There's this car chase sequence that's very kind of slapsticky and funny. There's this moment where Harry gets out of the car after a long ride and the fare is like over $1,000, which is kind of funny. They exchange glances. So I was surprised by like this dry humor that's throughout as well that I really appreciated and kind of enjoyed. Another thing with this movie is that the characters and the place very lived in and real, which I picked up on that and was feeling that as I was watching it and reflecting on it. And as Daniel will share when we get into the interview, he really got the inspiration from just this place, just being in this place in this certain moment. And so it makes a lot of sense now knowing that, and he'll expound on that more when we go to the interview. But there's great chemistry between these characters. They feel real. They don't feel kind of like fake. They don't feel like forced. They just kind of feel like they are who they are. They've lived lives. They will live lives after this. Um, and yet the place feels very lived in. It was shot mostly, I think, on location in Binghamton. And so, yeah, I just loved the kind of atmosphere of it. There's one character, Jack, that's kind of a part of this ragtag crew that Ralph picks up. That he wasn't my favorite character. He kind of rubs you the wrong way, which I think is on purpose, to be fair, and then has a moment of like kind of character revelation later in the film where I think you're supposed to feel like more sympathetic for him. And it didn't really click with me, but really he's the only character like that. Like, I love Ralph, the main character, obviously. I loved him. Harry, played by Daryl Johnson, is really great. The other friend in this crew is George. He's played by Peter Foster Morris, I believe. He was really funny and enjoyable. A lot of side characters that you only kind of encounter in moments. And then there's this guy, Scott Williams, who's the radio DJ that you kind of hear his voice throughout. Great stuff. Daniel even shared that a lot of that stuff was just kind of like improv, and this guy were riffing and sending him stuff, and so that the way they edited that radio DJ throughout is really, really great. And then thematically, there's a lot of stuff going on, probably more stuff than I was able to see. Probably even it's one of those films where you watch where you're like, I could watch this again and get something more out of it. And that's always a good indicator, right? And so and I think I think sometimes too, even is speaking to things that the artist maybe didn't even realize it was speaking to. One of the things I noticed was this. I don't want to talk too much about these because I talk about some of this with Daniel, so I don't want to like reiterate. But these like small kindnesses that you see throughout the film, a sharing of a quarter, a sharing of a toothpick. Daniel mentions, and then it's connected to this, the International Space Station is going to cross the sky is kind of this thing that you're anticipating and that Ralph is anticipating the whole movie. And, you know, you get that moment eventually, but it's, yeah, it's kind of like that International Space Station kind of represents the interconnectedness of people, the bridging division sort of thing. And you get that on a cosmic like level in space, but you also with that being the thing they're looking forward to seeing, but also in those small moments between characters. And I really liked that. And then, just that theme of always remember to look up is something that you hear kind of a few times throughout the movie, and just about that, you know, that connectedness to something greater that you kind of feel through the movie. It's not like that's the good thing about the movie. These aren't things that are like being said necessarily. They're things that you kind of feel. And that's what I really love with a movie. I love when I can connect with a movie and I can feel things that aren't necessarily like being forced down my throat, that aren't being like, I'm not being told this is how you're supposed to feel. I'm just feeling it along with the characters or with, with the filmmakers as they're capturing and editing these sequences. And so, but yeah, there's this connectedness to something greater, this longing for something transcendent that you can kind of feel in the movie. Um, and then, and there's a moment kind of late in the film that I absolutely love that I'm still kind of thinking about and contemplating on, that I talk about with Daniel and ask him about. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really great debut feature film. I'm looking forward to seeing more from Daniel and whatever he creates next. And so, yeah, but that's enough, I think, of my thoughts on the movie. We're going to transition now to that interview with Daniel Masciari about Stationed at Home. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Hi. Quick reminder that you, yes, you, can be a huge help to the production of this show. If you visit establishingshotpod.com/donate, you'll find out how to join the Establishing Shot family through some giving tiers starting as low as $5 a month. You heard that right, only $5 a month. And not only will you be helping me keep the show going, but you'll also get some perks yourself, like early and ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, access to a Discord server where we can chat it up about the show and movies in general, and more. Might even let you choose a movie for me to review for the show. Check out that link in the show notes to learn more. Back to the show. Hey, I am excited to have on this is, I believe, your second film from what I saw on kind of Letterboxd, IMDb. Okay, first feature film. Daniel, I should have asked you this before we started recording, but pronounce your last name for me.
Yep, Masciari.
Masciari, okay. See, I was gonna do the hard K sound, and so I'm glad I asked you. And so, yeah, Daniel Masciari, and he has a new film, his first feature film, Stationed at Home. It is available to buy and rent now. You can go hop on Amazon. I'm not sure if it's any other places, but I did see it on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Apple TV, Fandango.
Great. Yeah.
Dish Network.
Yeah, so you can go check it
Oh,
out now. But we're gonna talk to Daniel about him just like his journey to this film, and then dig into the film a little bit. So Daniel, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to talk to you about uh your journey to this film, and you know yeah, I'm excited. How are you?
good. Thank you, Eli. Really appreciate being here. Excited to talk with you.
Yeah. So, you know, this is your first feature film, but I'm sure this just didn't just like happen. You didn't just wake up and decide one day, oh, I'm going to direct a film now. So I would love to hear, what drew you to film and made you want to be a director. Was it a moment in your childhood, or was it a film you saw, or how did you come to this moment?
That's a great question. I guess I could answer it in a number of ways. When I was little, my parents got me this little Canon ZR 300 camera, because they knew that I wanted to like mess around and make films with my friends and everything. So we made some like, terrible films with that. And I always I always felt like there was a vision that could never be executed when I was a little kid. And so I was just tooling around, and it became this passion of mine to edit films. So
Mm.
I was always shooting things with my friends just to get to edit them, because I was, solitary, and I could kind of create something on my own.
Hmm.
And then it wasn't, a plan to make my first feature film from the get go. I was working as an editor for 10 years or so. Well, at the time, I guess, because I've been making this film for like 6 years, so like 5 years at the time. And I got this idea for the film for Station at Home when I was on a bus from New York City to Ithaca, New York, and we stopped in Binghamton. And it was a cold winter night, and I was listening to this song "Dusk" by Duke Ellington, and
Yeah.
something about stepping out and looking at this abandoned train station on a train track. There was some mood that I was just really gravitating to, and the music and the cold, it just inspired the film that is out now. And so I was imagining Eric Bjarnar, who plays Ralph, as this
Hmm.
lone cab driver, kind of in this forgotten city. So yeah, it was I never said, oh, I want to, just make films. I always made my short films and this film from the same source of inspiration, where I felt the need, like I had to make it. There was something existential about that process to me. So
Mm.
I'd say that was sort of the motivation for this. That's definitely the motivation for this film. And everything I write is, there's some yearning inside that it has to be a film. Some idea has to be a film.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you get from, that kind of like transcendent moment of inspiration to, a script and a crew, and like what does that process look like for you? What steps do you take, I guess, along the way?
I love that question. Yeah. So fortunately, I have, I, I mean, on this film, I just had the best collaborators you could imagine. And with this film, I wrote the film with a lot of inspiration from the city of Binghamton
Hmm.
and actors that I had worked with before who are just so amazing. So I was able to actually write the parts. Most of the characters in the film I wrote for them. So I
Cool.
knew the chemistry between them. I could knew sort of the vibe that I would get from working with them. And I was really using that as muses, essentially, to
Mm.
sort of get an idea of where the film will go, because I could imagine them as those characters in an interesting way. Some of the characters I didn't have that, but for the bulk of the leads I did.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. And what I guess like so when I was watching the movie, there was this moment where um I really love Jim Jarmusch films. And so
Hmm.
there's a moment when I was watching it where I was like, man, I'm picking up some Jim Jarmusch vibes. And so I don't know if it's like another indie director like Jim Jarmusch, but what were your inspirations like film wise, like maybe a director, or maybe like a specific film? Were there any things you had like in mind that kind of like you were drawing from, not necessarily like, I'm going to make a movie like this, but just like inspirationally?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, when I was writing the film, I really just felt this. It was almost a myopia. Like I just
Mm.
knew the film I wanted to make. I knew the cab driver was waiting for the International Space Station, and I knew the characters that would surround him while I was writing it.
Hmm.
So there was no feeling of, oh, this particular film was inspiring me in that way.
Sure.
I'd say, like, I mean, when I was little, I would watch a lot of oddball films that my parents would show me. Just they had this their first date. They saw like The Elephant Man, and that film I saw when I was like really young. I saw a lot of Hitchcock films growing up, and yeah, and Antonioni films as well. So I think these films definitely inspired me. Um, I mean, I love Jim Jarmusch as well. A lot of people have made the connection with this film, I think largely because of the sort of black and white, and
Yeah.
Night on Earth is a
Right.
cab film as well. So I mean, to me, it's like hugely flattering,
Yeah.
although it's like also, you know, I have a lot of admiration for him and these other filmmakers. So it's definitely a funny feeling. And then Kiarostami as well. I love Kiarostami films
Mm.
like Taste of Cherry and Close Up. So yeah, I think these films definitely had an effect on me in terms of how you can take a simple subject, or like a simple character even,
Right.
and sort of create a very fruitful sort of place that they exist in a sort of with a beauty sort of shined on it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think the inspiration was definitely from just like years of watching films that like a lot of people don't see.
Right.
That sort of realization that film can really be a poetic medium.
Yeah.
So I'd say,
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I was going to say, one thing I noticed that I really honestly, for first time directors, a lot of times you don't see is the visual language. So a few things that I have in mind are like there's a lot of whenever you get to a new setting, you use a lot of insert shots of just kind of like the environment to kind of you really build like the atmosphere of each new kind of place they end up in by just kind of throwing in some insert shots of some things on a shelf or you know these people over here. And so I really liked that. And then also just like there's that kind of more comical visual moment where Ralph is scratching off his ticket, and then it
mm,
immediately cuts to them like chowing down and cutting into their steaks. But it's how do you envision those communicating in those visual ways instead of having the characters dialogue about the atmosphere or that sort of thing?
yeah, I love that question. I think when I'm writing, especially this film, I really wanted to almost slow time down a bit.
Yeah.
So there was just this instinct of, you know, just slow it down and see what you can find in those textured moments,
Mm.
those inserts. And
Yeah.
working with Jackson Jarvis, who's just one of my best friends, incredible DP. He was involved from the get go. Like the second I sent him my first script, he's like, "I want to do this." So we really had fun making sure we got those inserts in the textures of the film,
Hmm.
especially because so much of the film is about the cosmos, right?
Right.
So we wanted to play with high angle shots, low angle shots, things that sort of give this connection between the ground and the sky.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's very subtle sometimes. Like there might be some wide shots where the camera's just ever so slightly tilted up or at a slighter low angle than you'd normally do. And I think it just sort of we wanted the characters in the film, like especially when they're walking around town, kind of feel like aliens or something on Earth, where they're just in this forgotten place. So I'm kind
Yeah.
of rambling here, but I love that you picked up on those inserts, because I think I love a good insert shot. There's
Yeah.
something about it that um I don't know, the audience just gets kind of hypnotized on these like
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it makes sense too because you talked about being just inspired by this place, and a place is like what makes a place have a certain feeling or a certain vibe are those things that you like look around and see when you walk into a new place or a new room or whatever. And
Mm.
so I feel like it was because you were so inspired by the place. It makes sense that you wanted to capture that vibe by you know giving us those shots, those visual shots to help us feel what you, I guess, were feeling when you were inspired to make it.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that, and again, like just harping on the insert shots as well. There's something about you can do a lot with sound too when you're in an insert shot
Yeah.
because the whole space of sound opens up when you're just looking at, say, a shot of Duke Ellington in Ralph's apartment.
Hmm.
What is that sound? Maybe it's just silence or something like that. So, yeah, I think sound was a huge part of this film. And working with Jack Lydon, our sound designer and mixer, we created a lot of really fun sounds together and found a lot of cool ways to give that space of Binghamton its due when it comes to the sonic world. Because when you're in Binghamton, because of the architecture is so vast, and especially in the winter when it's kind of empty, you can hear, the faintest sound will reverberate across the city. It's a really beautiful, like a motorcycle miles away, you'll hear that little vibration if you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's funny how like these like small places that no one knows about have such like distinct feelings and vibes and unique
Yeah.
like qualities. I love that. And I think I really think you capture that well through the movie. What
Thank you.
I would love to hear what inspired placing this around the International Space Station. I'm assuming you had kind of like late 90s in mind when it was kind of the International Space Station was like a new exciting thing. But what kind of
Mhm.
inspired that idea?
Eric Bjarnar, who plays Ralph,
Okay.
he in real life he loves the International Space Station, and it was years after he had sort of told me more about it that I remembered that thought that he had put into my mind. This little dot in the sky. And it just felt right. He's waiting for that in 1998 because that's when it first launched.
Mhm.
And um, to me, it was this perfect example of the most mundane thing in the world, a dot in the sky.
Mm,
Yet it has so much meaning historically and I think emotionally as well.
mm.
When someone can look up there and say, for all the troubles people have on Earth, there are humans up in the sky right now flying around and orbiting the earth, not always people up there, but
Right.
it's there's a magic in that sort of feeling that I always loved. And so yeah, it was Eric's, essentially his passion for this idea and this object in the sky that allowed me to dream a lot about how that yearning to see that could affect the other characters in a way that maybe they don't even know until the end.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that I was kind of noticing is I guess the idea of the International Space Station is kind of this coming together despite differences. And I saw kind of along with that like very like cosmological idea is this smaller like tangible idea of like small kindnesses. So like
Mm,
and it seemed like throughout the film that was most like the recurring way it was used is like, hey, do you have a quarter? Hey, do you have like any money? And it's these guys who have nothing basically like sharing with each other with these small kindnesses. And
yeah.
I don't know if that was like an intentional connection of like this cosmological coming together despite differences connected with these small kindnesses too.
I love that. I really love that reaction. I always definitely wanted to put a microscope to this film, so we're picking up on these subtleties, little, like, yeah, like the quarter, toothpick,
Mhm.
um, these little things that, you know, somehow have an effect. if he didn't scratch the scratch off there with Harry's quarter, they may not have gotten, the whole story wouldn't have unfolded.
Yeah.
So so it was Harry's giving nature to give him the quarter because, he feels like this man is someone he could be friends with. It's
Mm-hmm.
those, and I don't know about you, but in everyday life, we could meet someone who, like a cab driver, for example, or someone, working at a convenience store where you have this maybe bizarre connection with them that ends there. Like maybe there's like a chemistry that just ends there.
Yeah.
And this film is about, having a moment like that where you're like, this, like there's something there, there's some kind of connection, but taking it all the way to, one whole night.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that is a funny thing of like making those small connections you make with people that you probably will never see again, and the I guess the what if of what if I had more time to spend with this person, and you even in the end you kind of get the feeling like I feel like Ralph and Harry will cross paths again. Uh,
yeah. I think that's I love that thought as well, because when we were watching it, we had our Binghamton premiere last night. I actually had that similar thought where, I on the one hand was thinking, oh well, he's never going to meet him again. They met that night and then there you go. But there was this bond and this friendship. And again, I got to give credit to these actors. Daryl Johnson in that for Harry, and Ralph talking about their dynamic, Harry and
mhm.
Ralph's dynamic. Eric and Daryl just have such great chemistry.
Yeah.
I feel like they were always meant to play this role together. They're both kind of like the Blues in a way. There's something about them that they can get on that wavelength of mood. And Daryl actually describes the film as a haiku in a way, a sort of poem of sorts in these subtle moments. And that moment actually in the diner where, it was scripted as Ralph looking out the window and Harry looks out the window to see what he's looking at. But, and then I had written it like Ralph looks to Harry and Harry looks to Ralph, and then they both sit back. But they played that moment up a little bit in rehearsal, and I loved it, where they both kind of go one after the other. It's just a fun moment where they're both kind of in on something, maybe without knowing
Yeah.
it. It works very. It's like, in a very walks a fine line that I like.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I also noticed, in the as the before the credits roll, you said that this was dedicated to your grandfather, and I was wondering if the character of Ralph was kind of influenced by, or inspired by him as well, and in what ways that might be.
Yeah, I think, in retrospect, I think, well, there were a couple layers to this. So, one, I grew up watching a lot of films with my grandfather because he would let me stay up late, and,
Yeah.
my parents didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And his name was Ralph.
Mm.
And I really wanted him to see this film, but he had passed like a year or two before we shot. So
Mm.
that wasn't possible. And he remembers, Eric Bjarnar, who plays Ralph, had come over to my family's place once and visited in Boston, where I'm from. And my grandfather made him meatballs in this Italian sort of tradition.
Yeah.
And so the character named Ralph, I think my grandfather had an innocence to him, like a
Mhm.
mood of innocence that name Ralph just sort of reminds me of. There's something very simple about it, and something very, to use a synesthetic idea, like the color brown sort of just comes to my mind when I think
Mm.
of the word Ralph. It's sort of like a very calming, innocent kind of vibe. So yeah, I think in that sense, I didn't name the character Ralph off of my grandfather, but I think that the name came to my mind probably because of a similar feeling I have with that name. So yeah, I think that's about it with that analysis. But yeah, I like the question.
Yeah. Um, Now there's this other character that I was a bit of an enigma for me. It is I'm trying to pull up the Elaine. Is it Elaine?
Yeah,
So she rides with Ralph. to this hotel, and there are these sequences throughout the film where you cut to just Elaine and her in the hotel. What was what was the thought process with that character? Because we end up spending more time with her, kind of by herself than I expected, I guess, when I first saw her. I would love to hear more about like that character, and there's kind of this, I don't want to give away too much in this,
Yeah.
but like this kind of surreal kind of moment that she has. I love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and without giving too much away to the audience. Yeah, I mean, I always felt Elaine was this character who was sort of the city of Binghamton, like sort of the other dimension of Binghamton. I always felt like the city of Binghamton, there's this hyper real kind of quality to it. And then there's this other dimension to it, this timelessness to it. And I always felt like her character was going to explore the underworld of Binghamton. So the character of Elaine always felt to me like the spiritual part of the film, the other dimension of Binghamton, because I always saw Binghamton as having, this reality of 1998, this sort of forgotten city, but then this spiritual timelessness to the city that to me, Elaine was this sort of force. She could be in the late 1800s or the 1960s or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and without giving too much away to the audience, um, her purpose as an enigma, I think I'm happy that came through because I wanted it to be this question of who is she, and seeing it all connect to the adventure of the other characters. I really wanted to tie the sort of the surreal, the sort of other dimension of the city to the real in a way that felt natural to the progression of the film.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because when you were talking, I was just thinking, man, I've never really thought about how, we might think about like how we kind of have different sides of ourselves, our like physical side and our more spiritual side of ourselves. But I've never really thought about that as much in terms of like a place. Like a place has its physical side, but also this like kind of communal spiritual side to it that, you can feel when you go somewhere new, maybe don't know how to explain it, but that's super
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. It's like the idea of the uncanny in a way.
Yeah.
That feeling of whoa. And I actually what's so fascinating too is when I started writing the film, a friend of mine reminded me, or I guess I think I had known about it. I'm blanking if I knew about it or if it's the first time I was learning about it, that the Twilight Zone was spawned in Binghamton. That's where the idea came from. In fact, Rod Serling's, there's like a high school named after him. So yeah, I think there's something about the city that has this, from the visuals of the buildings and maybe some other aspects to it, but there's something that feels timeless, at least to me. So I think that, that spiritual dimension of the location was really important to me because I think in some ways allows the audience to become like almost like be it's like familiar yet not familiar at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, I'm happy that the audiences seem to pick up on that, and I think Elaine's enigma, her enigmatic quality, brings us to that throughout the film. And I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, that's really interesting too about the Twilight Zone because as soon as you said that, my mind immediately went to this. There's a kind of Christmas themed Twilight Zone episode called "The Night of the Meek." I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but I don't know where that was shot. But it has a very like the town has a very similar vibe to Binghamton and Stationed at Home. So I don't know. I'll have to look that up after and see where that episode was shot.
Yeah, no better way to spend your Christmas holidays than watching The Twilight Zone for sure.
It's a great Christmas episode.
I love it.
It's it's one of my brother-in-law's like favorite things to watch. He's the one that introduced it to me.
Yeah.
A Christmas time tradition for him.
I'll have to check that out.
So one of the other things that I noticed is this this like radio announcer throughout the film is talking about different things, and it all kind of culminates in this kind of transcendent moment, you know, where he's talking about the passing of the International Space Station, and there's this visual moments that I won't explain in too much detail, but of a person like going into a door that you're seeing through a hall, and you know, into some light, uh, and you know, the announcer is talking about, you know, the moment where like we'll say goodbye to the space station as it passes through the sky, and someone else will be on the other side of the world, will be welcoming
Yeah.
it. And it really, like, as I was reflecting on that afterwards, it made me think about how kind of death can be not just a moment of loss, but a moment of like passing on a legacy of
Mm.
sorts. And you know,
Mhm.
kind of throughout, you see that Ralph is like reflecting on his mother too. And so I was just wondering if that's something that you had in mind, of just this idea of death as this kind of like passing on of a legacy and of a tradition. And
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I want to first say too, Scott Williams, who did the radio DJ, it's just
yeah, it's great.
fantastic. And he actually was sending me, he was riffing. So like a lot of that he just came up with. So a lot of these even more poetic phrases that he says throughout the film, he was just riffing in his like bathroom and sending me like voice things, and then ultimately we recorded it properly. So I have to say, like, this idea too of death and the poetic sort of build of the radio DJ was something that we found, a lot of it at least we found while we were editing
Yeah,
the film.
I love that.
Which again, I come from an edit. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I come from an editing background, and so to me, it's, you know, I wanted to make sure that as we were in post production, there was room to heighten things and elevate things without it being just, you know, just what we shot, just the script. I wanted it to, you know, be able to flow, but still have those anchor points to make sure it all is correct. But yeah, I think to me, yeah, anyways, yeah, the space station is, again, at least, I mean, I'm probably wrong about this, but visually, as far as we can see humans out there, we're pretty far out. I mean, we're not that far, you know, in terms of the
Right.
galaxy and the universe, but it still looks like we're getting out there, you know? So yeah, I always, and again, not to give too much away, but I really wanted to have this idea as, you know, not that, you know, heaven or, you know, the afterlife is necessarily in another sort of, and maybe it's just further out, you know, maybe it's just, you know, in
Yeah.
space or
Not as
something.
far
I don't
away
know.
as
It
we
was just an
think, kind
idea.
of thing.
Yeah.
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 Maybe the, you know, as just something we were playing with. Yeah, just like the idea of space, like perhaps it's all out there, and you know, I don't know. I'm just riffing right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
People are probably gonna think I'm like, I don't know, tripping out or something.
No, no, like, I love that, because I think sometimes when, like, we create things, it ends up like we have to reflect on what we've created and, you know, think on it, and it shows new things to us, even though we're the one that made it, you know?
For
And I
sure.
think that's a beautiful thing about art and creating things.
I think the black and white also allows for this ability to imagine more than what meets the eye.
Yeah.
I think sometimes color, I mean, obviously I love films that are made in color, but I think it's a bit more of a hurdle to allow the audience um to go into their own imagination a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's what I was going to say.
Great. Yeah. So, before we go, I would love to hear. You know, do you have any other like stories that you're like itching to tell? Do you have anything else on the horizon?
Yeah. I can tell you off air about
Okay,
that.
that's fair.
It's sort of,
Great.
it's in its infant stage,
Great. I'd love to hear about
but I
that
can tell you about it.
secretly. Um, well, yeah. One last question before we end. I would love to hear just a recommendation, like something maybe that you've watched recently. It could be new, could be old, that you just loved and want to recommend for other people to see after they watch Stationed at Home.
Yeah, for sure. So before I forget, yes, to all the audience watching this, please, it's so important for independent films like ours. Go on Rotten Tomatoes and rate and review it,
Yes.
and Letterboxd if you haven't. It really helps us get more and more visibility.
Yeah, and I'll make
Oh,
sure to link those in the episode
thank you.
description so people can just click on them and go review it. So,
Thank you so much. But yeah, to a movie recommendation that I've seen recently. Now, there's quite a few. There's this film I absolutely love called Delirious
okay.
from 2006, starring Steve Buscemi.
Okay.
He plays a paparazzi guy, and not to give too much away, but he takes this young man off the street essentially to like be his assistant, and the young man has these aspirations to become an actor. And so there's this like real sort of like heated relationship about like how much he owes Steve Buscemi for helping him when he gets some. It's an incredible film. I can't believe I only had just seen it. It's so good. So I highly recommend that. I love the film The Passenger by Antonioni starring Jack Nicholson. Love that film. Days of Being Wild by Wong Kar-wai. It's amazing.
Yes.
So those three for now.
Okay. Great. I got more than I even bargained for, so I'll take it. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on and talking about your movie. I really enjoyed it, and I hope other people go rent it and then review it, and I hope everyone enjoys it too. So best of luck to you on your journey with this film and whatever projects you might have coming next.
Thanks a ton, Eli. Really appreciate being here.
Thanks.
Hello again. Do you know how you can really support the show for free in just a few minutes or less? That's right. Just leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple, or wherever you listen that might allow for ratings and reviews. These really help the visibility of the podcast. In fact, just hit that pause button right now and drop the review right now. And then you can get back to the show. I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, I trust that you went and left that rating and review now. Back to the show.
Huge thanks to Daniel Masciari for coming on and talking with me about Stationed at Home. Like I've said already on this episode, I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend going and checking it out. As we kind of just talked about in the interview, you can rent it and buy it on all the kind of typical Apple TV, Amazon, Fandango at home. I think just search for Stationed at Home. I'll try to link some of those in the episode description. And yeah, please go watch it, go rent it, and support this film. Indie films are they have to work so hard to promote and to get it out there and get it in front of people. And so I'm glad that I have the opportunity to kind of help with that with this film that I really enjoyed. Yeah, you should go watch it and then go review it. I'm going to put the links to Rotten Tomatoes, which is something a lot of people use, and then Letterboxd, of course. So I'll link those so you can go review the movie, rate it. And that helps a ton, more than you can know. For every little review, every little rating helps a ton, as I know as a podcaster, an independent podcaster. So go do that. But that's really it for the show today. We have a few more things coming out over the course of the rest of the year. They might not be every week, but I'm going to try to throw in a few more episodes before the end of the year. And so be on the lookout for that. I'm hoping I can get a Best of the 21st Century so far podcast recorded and out next. So that's the plan. You'll find out if that's what happens when you see it in your podcast feed. But I want to just kind of go through a list of just films that I think represents the century so far, this first quarter of the century from 2000 to 2024. And so I'm going to do that, and that should be a fun episode. maybe a Christmas episode that I have in the works coming out at some point. And so, yeah, those are a couple things that you might see in your feed soon. Be on the lookout for those. But until then, I've been Eli Price, and you've been listening to The Establishing Shot. We will see you next time.
We were happy here. For a little while.
But look, I figure it this way. Better to be king for a night than schmuck for a lifetime.